welcome everybody, and thanks for joining us on Talks on Tuesdays. And if you're watching us later on YouTube, be sure to subscribe and like us and leave a comment. And I'm Barb Solomon, and I'm hosting by myself today, but I've got plenty, as you can see, of my favorite guests. So we're going to do kind of a casual day today and no actual topic except that just anything that bubbled up from anybody from last week or anything that happened that was notable during the week. So let's just share. We'll talk for about a half an hour. And so who wants to go first? Who wants to jump in?
I don't mind jumping in. I had a couple things.
Okay,
I'll
yeah, let's
just I'll
hear.
I'll just I'll share one for now. It came up this morning and I'm not sure what caused it, but it was about time. And I realized we're never out of time. We're never not on time. We're just experiencing time. We're never short on time. We're just experiencing time. I'm not sure why that came to me this morning, but apparently it was the information that I needed to share and also just be reminded of.
Oh, yeah, I like that. And
Julie,
that's a good share. And Cecilia, I see that you're like really grinning and anything you want to
Well,
add to that or
yeah.
any thoughts?
Well, I completely agree. There's no such thing as time. It's just it gives us earthlings in these bodies um, a relevant point from where we're starting something and choosing to call it an end kind of thing. But it's really there is no such thing as time, and that can be seen throughout the work with reconnective healing and throughout life actually. So it's just beautiful.
mhm.
So I love that. Thank you for sharing that. Mhm. Julie.
Yeah, Duran, that's interesting that you brought time up because no, lately I notice how much I feel like I'm ruled by time, how I'm always checking the time and how much time do I have? What time do I have to be there? Um, and that I thought to myself, my God, I am a slave to time, and not a good thing particularly, but that's what I was, it brought to my attention that how much I depend on time or, sort of um, by ruled by it. Yeah.
Mhm.
So Jules, hearing what Durin was saying, have what does that where does that take you? And I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I'm just curious as to if it's helped you kind of maybe.
Well, it's a different a perspective to look at instead of feeling like I'm ruled by time, but because I find myself always checking the time, um, so that time can mean different things, and also to remember that time there is no time, which for me it's hard to think of that as a reality just because, of who we are and finite people and we have clocks and phones and, you know, time. We live our life by time, kind of, or at least a lot of people do.
Right. Yeah, that's so interesting. And especially when you were talking about kind of being tethered by the electronics that yesterday our internet went out at my house for about 3.5 hours. And I still had my phone because my phone was connected through Verizon, so it didn't need the Wi-Fi. And I used to have a hotspot on my phone, so I can use my phone to connect to the internet, but I stopped that service. So it was like, oh, I had done a bunch of stuff in the morning, and right when I was kind of wrapping up my little chores, I got bumped offline. And so, so I was like, oh, well, now this is the universe telling me it's time for me to go read a book or something. I'll just kind of get off from, but I'd check in every now and again to see if it was available. And I started thinking about how even more than like 20, 25 years ago, we have become so connected to our connections and how we used to just sit and, read a book or wait for somebody to call us on the landline and not have to feel so always available and always, checking our email or whatever it is. And in some ways, that kind of makes me think a little bit about what Doreen was saying as far as like altering our perspective of time and how we have, or at least I know I have, and I think society as a whole has kind of slowly gone down this path of electronics are supposed to make things so much easier for us, but in some ways, it adds a different layer of something that we hadn't experienced in the past. So yeah, it's just kind of interesting.
Renee posted something in the chat. It was something about why do you give it so much importance? Time.
Ah,
And that's a good question. I think for me, it always boils down to my experiential self versus my non-experiential self. So when we talk about time, never being late and it not being a factor, that's my non-experiential self coming in and as a little reminder. But like everyone just pointed out, my experiential self kind of does need to give it a little bit of importance. And I just became aware that I'm not saying anything that everybody here doesn't already know. We're just kind of having a little reminder session here, which I always enjoy. So yeah, Renee, that's a good question about the importance. And what it made me think of is I had a friendship end recently, because new friendship, because a little bit because of a concept of time. She was offended about my being 5 to 15 minutes late. And for me, I was right on time, looking at the big picture. I was looking at the big picture. I'm like, I'm really happy. Everything's getting what it needs. And she had said before that it didn't bother her that I was, sometimes 5 to 15 minutes late. But one day, her little experiential self got really focused and it became very important. And she was super offended. And I had no intentions of she'd known me for many, 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 many months. She would know that would never be my intention to be rude to her. And it takes another tangent as well that I was also going to bring up today, because this experience with her was really, really rich in lessons. But time is something that is really important to people. Like my grandfather he had to be like down to the second on time. And it made him feel powerful. I think he felt like he was in control if he could get from point A to point B and land at point B perfectly. And everybody made fun of him for that. And I never understood that. I'm like, okay, he just does that, whatever. But I think through his life, he found power in making time important. And somehow it worked for him. And he was a very successful guy. And he must have been rewarded for being on time. That's all I can think of.
yeah. And it's interesting what different people latch onto as important. And Renee, I know that you unmuted, so I know that you want to say something, and I'll let you jump in real quickly. But I just wanted, or in a minute, but I just wanted to add to what Julie and Doreen was saying about time. I've always found for me, if I feel like I'm running late and it's like, oh gosh, I'm going to be late. If I just remember to give it up to the universe and say, okay, just whatever, help me be here when I need to be here. I've been in situations where it felt like there was a time warp and I'd get there on time. And one time I got there a little late and I'm like, okay, whatever, I'm not going to freak out about it. It was a class and I was going up the steps to class and I turned around. I was a few minutes late and the instructor was right behind me. So, so and again, it's just that remembering that, what you called experiential self versus non-experiential and kind of trying to merge those. And it helps it helps to bring, at least for me, it makes it okay, for whatever happens. But okay, go ahead, Renee. I know that you are unmuted, so let's hear you.
Well, I just wanted to maybe address the concept of quality time, which means that, from my perspective anyway, that I am not attached to outer time, which means that things unfold in a way and in a timing which I have no control over. And oftentimes when I allow that to happen, I'm given opportunities or gifts that come my way because I have no idea that something was going to present itself. Whereas if I would have been racing around, or I don't even wear a watch, I haven't worn a watch for many, many years. And I actually love the idea of not wearing a watch because I can find out what time it is anytime I want to, but I don't really need to find that out. So kind of interesting that I'm the complete opposite of what Julie mentioned about being very attached to time and being very controlled by time. I am not. And I have to say that it allows me great freedom to not worry about when something will happen. And yes, I'm extremely punctual. That's very, very important to me. I respect other people's time. And if I have a commitment or I've made an appointment with someone, it really bugs the crap out of me when someone comes in, like doctors, for example. You could have an appointment at 9 o'clock and sometimes it's 9:45 before they actually, call your name. And that sometimes can be problematic, but kind of as a general rule, I love the concept of Dr. Joe Dispenza being nowhere, no one, no time, no thing. And it's taken me a long time to get to this place where I'm really just releasing everything and kind of staying open to whatever might show up. So I don't have like we have divine time, which has its own perspective, and it's not necessarily anything that I'm going to understand. So it's about trust, it's about letting go, it's about allowing, and it's about sort of just being flexible and open-minded. If something doesn't happen or you miss something, sometimes it's a blessing if you miss something where you were supposed to be somewhere at a particular moment in time and you dodged a bullet. And this happens quite frequently, or you didn't get harmed by something that happened because you were not there at that moment. So anyway, that's kind of all that I have to say for the moment. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Renee. Yeah, that was a good share and some good ideas. And I liked what you said about just kind of allowing and trusting, because that's so much of it, I think.
Thank you so much, Renee. And and Darren, you talk, somebody's talking about somebody who is so precise on their timing, who needs to be right on time, right on time, right on time. My sister's like that. And so whenever I plan anything with her, I make sure to, do my best to be there on time. However, sometimes the navigation, I'm an hour away or whatever from her. So sometimes the navigation says I'm going to be, 5 minutes early, whatever, but then traffic comes in. And so I can text her, if there's traffic saying traffic is now saying da 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 da. And she just feels better that I communicated and said, please be safe. Just take your time, get here when you get here. But if I don't communicate, if I don't text her, then she's really so it's a whole different thing. So I think that she really just cares so much and she just really wants to be informed. And so that's all. And so I take that into appreciation. But for the waiting room and the doctor, because my sister's the same way with that too. And she says, if I talk to her when she's in a waiting room, she's like going, yes, my appointment was at this time. And you know how much that that brings me joy. And she just is very, focused on that. I said, well, think about whatever's going on with you right there, right now. What, who's in the room with you? What do you have to contemplate? Can you take a moment to breathe, whatever? And my other sister, when she's going to an appointment for a doctor, or whatever, she brings this little crochet disc, and it's like a Frisbee and stuff. So if she's in the room and she's waiting and there's other people in the room, she'll take it out and she'll toss it to them. And so she'll start a game of little crochet Frisbee because it's just cute and fun and everybody gets involved and it just doesn't hurt anybody. It's made out of a crochet disc. It's really cute. And so she does that if she's going to a waiting room and it's a possibility that there's going to be some other people there. So, but anyway, that's just something to do to pass the time. Just let you know.
That's a great idea. And it's a nice way to connect with other people too, so you're not just sitting there kind of all on your own. So this reaching.
For me, I like the idea of trying to hit a window of time, because being really precise to me is just very constricted and controlling. And there are some types of people that you deal with that that they can't be precisely on time. If you've ever had a horse and you're going to have a vet come out or a farrier, you're talking about a window. I can be there between 1 and 2. Okay. To me, that's more flexible. And to me, it says, at least for a responsible person, I know that you're just taking care and making sure all the needs are getting met, which is where I come from. So I more love windows of time and not so much disappointments at 10:10. Okay. Expectations.
That's a lot of it, I think, is the expectations. In fact, I remember when my son was little and I took a parenting class because I got to the point where I felt like all I was saying to him was no, 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 yelling, yelling, and I just didn't want to be that way. And one of the big things that I learned, I mean, was about expectations. And oftentimes with our kids, when they're little, we have these expectations of them that are unrealistic. And so, it's really kind of a setup for failure. And if you can apply that in the larger world, for me, it's kind of finding a balance. I mean, if I'm going to be going to a movie, I don't want to be walking in 5 minutes late because then you kind of miss something. But there's a time and place for that flexibility that you're talking about, and I think that that's important. And I know my grandparents, one side of the family was always like super early, and the other side was always super late. And when my mom would invite them for dinner, would always be waiting. And the ones who were early would get there early and they'd be like waiting and kind of chomping at the bit. And I'd say to my mom, well, why don't you just tell, Grandma Fedora to come earlier and then tell the other ones to come later. And she's like, no, that's not, we're not supposed to be doing that way. They're supposed to be here on time. And to me, it's like, hey, that's a good way to find the compromise. Why not? But, she never tried that. So
it feels too manipulative. Maybe she felt like she was manipulating too much.
yeah,
She's
that
like,
could be.
look, it is what it is. Just come on time. But
yeah. Or this is when dinner's being served and this is when we're gonna eat. And if you're here then you can eat. And if not, then it's a little cold, but whatever. So
yeah,
I don't know. There's a lot of ways of looking at it, but yeah, who knows? Yeah. Anything else that popped up for anybody during the week?
well, I have another one. Speaking of children,
Yeah,
that
sure. It's always fun to talk about.
popped up just this morning, actually. I just was on YouTube for a second because I was killing time. And those little shorts on YouTube, they're just like 30 seconds or whatever. So it was a picture of an influencer, sort of a spiritual teacher that I've been getting really good information from for at least 10 years, maybe more. And the caption said, children are masters at this. And then something like, and we all need to, get on the bandwagon. And so I'm like, okay, you got me. I'm going to watch this. It's only going to be 30 seconds. However, it really clarified some stuff. And it was a concept that my brain's been trying to wrap itself around forever. And she just said it. And it's this. Children are masters at helping you feel how you just made them feel. Now you have to think about that for a second, but we all do that. If I just made someone feel something, whether it was intentional or not, the way that they're telling me how they feel, let's see, I hope I'm not screwing this up, because it's actually a very simple concept, but I realized, oh, that's exactly what happens in like pretty much every interaction I've ever had where I felt like someone hurt me, or maybe I've, offended them, and even though they knew I didn't do it intentionally, they were still having those feelings. So maybe I should repeat it. Did anyone get that when I said it the first time? Did it make sense?
I did, yeah.
Yeah. It's like they're mirrors.
What's that?
They're mirrors.
it's it is. It's mirroring. Exactly. Um, but it was the way she articulated it was just perfect. I was like, oh, thank you. I'm gonna I'm gonna be reliving that. I'm gonna ponder this daily because I think it's important. And the reason it was important is because I I like to feel like people acknowledge if I did it intentionally or not intentionally. Usually it's totally unintentional. Usually it has more to do with someone's, maybe having low self-esteem or whatever, and they got triggered. Um, but let's acknowledge whether it was intentional or not unintentional, because it does matter. And because the relationship is going to end if we can't both apologize. One person shouldn't be the only one apologizing. It needs to be both because it's a mirror. For the very reason what Julie just said, because it's a mirror, I think an apology, it is really healing if it comes from both sides. And as soon as I sense that the other person is incapable of an apology, let alone in this situation, I know I need to just walk away.
Well, it's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
To me, that whole concept brings me back to awareness, and being aware of how if I have an interaction with somebody and then how they respond, or, are they like being crabby around me or what, then yeah, it's time for me to kind of just maybe take a breath or a step back and
Mm-hmm.
what am I projecting? So
Yep.
go ahead, Cecilia.
Yeah, I just want to share on this because it took me back to a time when there was a situation, my one of my sisters, and she, you know, responded to something I had done or said, or I don't even remember what it was that was that important for me. But she took it in a way that was very hurtful and harmful and da, 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 and you owe me an apology. I said, I I'm sorry that that something occurred that you took in a certain way, but it wasn't my intention, and that was not how I felt when I was doing or saying whatever I did. So I'm sorry that that's the way it was received, but there's really nothing I can do about it because it wasn't the way I intended it. So,
Yeah.
I can't really apologize for that because I didn't intend it the way you received it. So
Yeah.
sometimes you have to acknowledge that also,
Yes.
that they're in a certain way of receiving because they're defensive or they're, combative or they're whatever. They took it in a way that wasn't the way it was meant when it was
Yeah.
offered. So I'm sorry that that's the way you took it, but I can't apologize for what I did or said
Yeah.
because wasn't that meant that way.
Mm-mm.
Was she okay with that?
She paused and she took a long time and she said, sometimes I don't know who you are. But then it was left, it was dropped. It was like, okay, but it was like,
That's funny.
I don't know who you are. So
It's kind of a, the spin-off to that is hurt people, which is one of those
Yeah.
little catchphrases we love. But it kind of changes the game when it's unintentional. And I know I see through people. Some people I see through easier than others, and it makes people very uncomfortable. And they're usually not even aware that it's happening. Sometimes I'm not even aware of it. But it triggers a lot of people. And I'm not going to stop doing it because it's just who I am. It's what I do. I've always been able to, have that ability. But it does trigger people's self-esteem a lot of the time. And in those situations, there isn't going to be a mutual apology, which means there ain't no relationship.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what I flashed on when I heard your comment initially, Durin, and this is something that happened when many, many years ago. I was probably 20, and it was back when I was still smoking pot. And I went over to a friend's house. We weren't super close, but we worked together. So I went over to her house. I'm not even sure why, just to visit, I guess. And her stepson was there. And he was maybe 3 or 4 years old. And I had smoked a joint on the way over, so I was pretty loaded. And I'm sitting on the floor kind of playing with him. And she was sitting up on the couch talking to somebody else who was there, and they were having kind of a separate conversation. And I was sitting there just playing with the kid because he seemed more interesting to me than they did. And he just looked at me at one point and he says, "Wow, I'm really loaded." And I just like looked at him like, "Did you just say that?" I mean, how did you talk about picking up what I'm feeling? It was like the most bizarre thing.
That's
And
awesome.
it was really strange. But again, I have never had any understanding of why that happened or how. It was just one of those fluky things that, you happens to you during life sometime. But and we just both looked at each other and cracked up. And
Three,
I thought of
four?
you when I thought of that situation when I heard your comment about that reflecting back. So
Barbara,
Yeah.
he was 3 or 4, you said?
maybe he was 4 or 5, but he was really young, really young. And I have
Awesome.
no idea where that came from. And I really would be surprised if he was really loaded. But yeah, it was strange. I mean, it was almost like he was just in my head, thinking about what I was thinking. So
Yeah, that's exactly what he did. He
yeah,
somehow like jumped into your experience and vocalized it.
yeah,
And speaking
totally.
of kids, it's important to realize that they can do stuff like that. And to not get they shouldn't get in trouble for it. Sometimes they get in trouble for these things that they do naturally.
Yeah,
Like
I
me,
know.
I totally get in trouble for seeing through people. Like, don't look I'm not even going to look at myself. You better not be looking at me.
Seeing what kind
Um,
of people?
I see right through people a lot of the
Oh,
time.
okay. Yeah.
And especially for people who don't want to look at themselves,
Mm.
that will eventually explode. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll bet.
Yeah. It's very interesting. And
See
it's okay.
people. When you say, Duran, when you say you see through people, does that mean you tell them what you see, or it's the way you react to what you see that allows them to see that you see through them?
I don't usually vocalize any of it, no, because I know that they don't want to see any of this stuff, but I'm seeing it. I'm totally seeing your shit. And I think sometimes after months or years of me not saying it because I know they don't want to talk about it or look at it, so I don't say anything, but they've been seen. And so now they're uncomfortable. Um, and so and when it reaches that point, it's like a little stick of dynamite. It just takes one little light, and then we're off.
Hmm.
You know?
That's interesting.
Mhm.
We can do a whole show on that.
Yeah. I mean, everybody on this call probably does that. Um, anybody with a high level of awareness is doing that, running that type of energy.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, probably to different degrees.
Hmm.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
one of the things that keeps life interesting is that we're all so different.
More different than we realize.
Yeah. Well, this has been a fun gathering today, everybody. Thank you so much.
Yes, I
Thank
just looked
you.
at the time.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
So
You
we'll
looked
see you
at the
next
time,
week.
Julie? Julie, did you look at
Yes,
the time?
at the time. I didn't look at
Julie looked at the time.
the whole time. I didn't look at the time. I looked at the time now and went, "Oh my God."
Well, they say time flies when you're having fun, right?
Yes.
Right. That's right. It's non-existent when you're having fun. No time.
Mm,
There you go.
yes.
Yeah. Okay, well, see everybody next week. Thanks for joining us.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thanks for being here. Okay.
Bye.